Then I saw a pony peering at us from the shadows of one of the smashed buildings. What made me pause was that the space barely had enough room for Pony's head. Red eyes narrowed as his face split in a nasty grin, and he slowly slipped into the shadows like they were inky water. I think we got. That was as far as I got before the shadows beneath me elongated in dark strips and rose up on all sides, before wrapping around me body like dark, crushing tentacles. If I'd been a flesh and blood mare, they probably would have constricted till I couldn't breathe. Rampage let out a yelp as she sank into her own shadow, struggling to pull herself out of the dark-like blackness. Psycho dove down to help her, when there was suddenly black streak that exploded against her and knocked her right out of the air, and into the rubble. I levitated out duty and sacrifice, looking for a target, and froze as I spotted her. The Batmare stood a few feet away, the shadows around her waving and undulating, as if distorted by her will. The dusky blue-maned mare glared at me as more shadow tentacles approached. I didn't want to kill her, but I took aim and fired the twin pistols. A shadow flashed up, and the lead slugs fell to the ground. Rampage erupted from the shadow, dribbling clouds of darkness, as she landed, then leapt again, as the shadows beneath her liquefied again. The red-eyed Batpony's head stuck out of the darkness, as the super-strong mare kept leaping out of the shady tar pit. Then Rampage turned and charged a heap of rubble next to the shadowy stallion, and an avalanche of rubble collapsed upon him. She looked at me a moment before starting to sink once more and leapt up so high I lost track of her. Psycho pulled herself off the rubble and back into the air, and immediately the shadowy streak flashed through the air and slammed into her gut, flashed away, and then smashed her face, and then flashed away once more. Now the Reaper was ready, as it streaked towards Psycho again. Then there was a shadow flash and Stygius appeared between the two, waving his hooves as he hovered there. It was a poor strategic position as Psycho's forehooves smashed into the back of his head as the streak smashed into his chest. Psycho grabbed him as he started to fall, and the shadow streak halted enough to see it was a bat filly with a dusky rose mane. She pressed her little hooves to her mouth in horror, and then glared at Psycho and once more streaked at her, beating upon Psycho's head as she held him in her hooves. I had problems of my own, as the shadows snaked up along my body and held me tight. Oddly, I didn't feel the slightest bit of panic at being constrained like this, but I couldn't just let the blue-maned mare beat me. I went into SATS and targeted her forelimbs and torso, and sent 3 bolts of magic into her. The glowing white bullets punched right through her shield, making her shriek as her shadows wavered. My horn lit up a light spell, and then another, and then another. I summoned as many little twinkling stars of light around me I could. The shadows wavered, and then melted away, and the mare glared in worry. "Stop fighting us!" I shouted at her. But she launched herself at me and the shadows, before her congealed and tightened into a black blade-like shape. I had a sword of my own, however, and the silvery metal met the magical blade of shadow with a spray of blue sparks. Pew! Ow! Little pouch! Brat, stop it! Psycho shouted, and then flew, and heaved the stunned Stygius into the air, as the streak launched itself at her yet again. This time, instead of hitting, she grabbed the little bat filly in a hug. The filly screamed and struggled as Psycho caught the armored bat pony on her back and drifted downwards. The bat filly hadn't given up quite yet, as it went from beating to biting the yellow mare. Her yellow eyes popped wide as she dropped Stygius to the ground and shook her hooves frantically. "Ow! Kill it! Get it off! Get it off!" The tar pit pony was oozing around, moving through the shadows of the rubble, as he searched for Rampage. Slowly more and more of him rose out of the shadows, dripping ephemeral globs of darkness. Then Rampage dropped from the skies atop him. The pair crashed into the shadows and disappeared completely from sight. A second later, the darkness returned to unbroken ground. I dueled with the Batmare, our swords flashing and flickering as I kept in the pool of light. Her own blade couldn't stand up to the edge of my own weapon, but she could endlessly resummon it. Still, she wasn't backing down, and worse, she knew how to fight with that dark shadow. Once I blocked it, and the blade just parted and reformed past it. The magical darkness bit deep into my shoulder, and I cried out as I tried to power the sword through to her, but she simply summoned a second one to deflect it. The ground where the pair had vanished heaved once, then twice, and suddenly exploded outwards as Rampage pulled herself from the ground. A second later she reached down and pulled an unconscious Batpony stallion from the earth. Then Rampage collapsed herself and pointed a hoof at me. "I'll be over momentarily, and she flopped over again. Nuts! Suddenly something huge came from the lip of the crater. The immense lacuna was almost double her normal size, and glowed with an aura of power. "This fight is over," she boomed in all of our minds. All of us gaped in astonishment at the giant halicorn. I couldn't agree more. A holder stallion said from above her. Armored in midnight black armor traced in silver etchings depicting moons, stars, and bat wings, the formidable-looking Batpony glared down at Lacuna. A moment later a sphere of darkness wrapped around Lacuna, and she vanished completely. Worse, all contact with her vanished instantly. Had he just annihilated her like that? No, I could still feel her, but she was somewhere else. I received a sensation of pure covetous lust from the goddess in my mind, but shock and rage let me ignore her, as I forgot the mare I fought, and targeted every magic bullet I can at the black Batpony stallion. The bullets streaked up at him, only to vanish before they reached him in little spheres of darkness. He dropped to the ground, not before me, but next to Stygius, as the Batpony struggled to pull the thrashing bat filly off of Psycho. The filly suddenly stilled and launched herself at the stallion, wrapping her forehooves around his neck with a gleeful squeak. Now, Darkling, Papa needs to talk to Stygius." He loomed over the wilting Batpony. "Well?" the black Batpony thundered. Stygius shrank back, and then huffed. He immediately unloaded into a barrage of squeaks and chirps, as he waves his hoof. Yes, to never told us as much." Then Stygius pointed at me and made more squeaks. Then he hunched his hips. The purple mare gave a tch, and shook her head as she looked at me in disappointment. "Oh, really?" the stallion said, arching his brow, as he looked at me speculatively. Stygius then shadow flashed into the air, and made a trilling of machine gun fire, before pointing his wings at Psycho and Rampage. How fortunate! Then Stygius strutted in a circle, chirping away, and immediately launched into a dance. Tenebra just stared at Stygius in stunned bafflement, as he shuffled back and forth. Finally he swooped higher and higher and higher, before shadow flashing back to the ground. He pointed at Psycho and made the same hunching motion, and now both the black stallion's brows were arched. Both. Or all three. The little filly on the stallion's back let out a chirp, hunching her hips a little, and the black stallion blinked and flushed. "Oh. Ask your mother." Tenebra was squealing and squeaking at Stygius in notes that make my mane stand on end. "Ask me what?" a mare said as she glided down from over the crater. Unlike the others, she didn't wear armor, but silvery silk that matched her moon-white hide. Her wings folded at her side and she looked at the armored black stallion. The filly launched herself into the air and zipped onto the white mare's back. "Ask me what, Hades?" she said a little more archly. Stygius was telling us all about his adventures, Persephone," he murmured as he looked at me. The filly chirped again, and she sighed and looked right at Stygius. "Oh," was all she had to say as he looked at what I presumed was his mother. The armored stallion wilted at once. Tenebra just smirked in glee. "No offense, but could some pony please tell me what's going on?" Psycho asked. "And what happened to Lacuna?" I blurted. Yes. Apologies," the white mare said as she closed her eyes. A moment later my ears tickled and buzzed a moment. 1 hour. Tenebra snapped at him. 1. But you just had to disappear for 3 days. Do you have any idea how much trouble I've been in after I let you go trotting all over the surface with these daywalkers? And how you managed to talk 2 of them into a... She shivered right to the tips of her wings. "We had no idea if they captured you or zapped you with freaky mind control powers, or did who knows what. Not that Wood wouldn't have deserved it." And she smacked him upside the head with his own shadow. "I know. I know I only said 1 hour, but, do you know, stuff happened, Stygius said in a surprisingly sweet tenor, as he tapped his forehooves together. Tenebra gave him a scathing look, but then he huffed. And the stuff I've seen, Tenebra. The battles we've fought are like the stuff from before the war. Blackjack is an amazing fighter, capable of overcoming amazing foes. You should have seen Magul in the prison. Then he looked at the worried yellow Pegasus, and Psi's really sweet too. Tenebra sighed, then whirled and trotted towards me. Well, thank you very much for your assistance, but I'm afraid that we'll be taking my idiotic brother back now. She glared at him crossly. I hope he liked his fun because he's going to be skimming water fungus for the next 10 years. Wait. Psycho snapped, and started between Stygius and his family. You're not taking Stygius anywhere. Stygius blinked and looked at her in shock, before smiling softly. And lacunae. I threw out again. See? This is why we attacked. Daywalkers are all insane, Tenebra muttered. Persephone then stepped forward towards Psycho. At first I tensed right alongside the yellow mare, but the white Batpony mare just smiled gently. I'm afraid we are. Stygius broke some of our most important rules, and while I am glad to hear he conducted himself with more or less dignity, he still must return with us. We hide for our safety. We always have. Yes. We had to fetch him ourselves to avoid the scandal. Court was absolutely ear-screeching for 3 days, while everyone questioned where Stygius went. Hades rumbled. Then he looked at us and frowned to the white Batmare. Wait. Are we going to have to kill them? I don't think that's going to go over well. Gee, you think? The bat filly flashed over on my back, and looked into my eyes, upside down. I don't want to kill them, Daddy. She's got glowy eyes. Okay. I could smile at that. And her legs are all metally. And her head all bonnety. 'Cause she's a unicorn, darkling, Tenebra said with strained patience, as the shadows lifted the unconscious Batpony and swept him over to the rest of them. A surfacer. A pony that isn't supposed to know that we exist. Well, that's stupid, Darkling pronounced, and then pointed at the motes of my light spell. Look at the pretties she made. Stygius turned to me with a sad smile. It was all that really needed to be said. He'd never replace glory, not pony could. But Psycho was another question. No. I won't let you take him from me. You'll have to kill me first. Oh, well, that's simply things, Hades rumbled with a relieved smile. Husband, Persephone said with slightly strained patience. What? It's not as if we can take her with us, the black stallion protested. Psycho grit her teeth, but now Stygius stood beside her with his own scowl. Wait. Why can't she join us? He looked at the yellow mare with a warm smile. I know I have to return, but why can't she come with us? Because, if she does so, she may not be able to leave. That is not a choice to be made lightly, Persephone said gravely, as she stood before Psycho and Stygius. Are you truly willing to give up your life on the surface to be with him? Do you really care for him that much? The yellow Pegasus flushed as she dropped her eyes. If you have any doubt, any at all, it will be better for you to remain with your old life. So I ask you again, simply, do you love him? Stygius looked on, nervously swallowing, as he kept his eyes locked on Psycho. Rampage was unconscious, and so she looked at me. I really didn't know what I could offer except a half smile, and hoped she did whatever she thought was right. Psycho balked, and then swallowed. When she opened her eyes, though, the worry and fear I'd seen in the for so long evaporated, as she looked at him. I do. Please let me come with you. She looked at me and smiled for the first time ever. There's nothing from my old life that I want anymore. Persephone looked at Stygius with a cool, firm gaze. She reminded me very much of my own mother. And do you love this mare enough to honor her, and protect her in our home? Persephone asked her son. To bring her joy and happiness and love. I do. Stygius said with a smile as he looked at the Pegasus. Very well, Persephone said with her own kind smile. Then I have no objections. Do you, husband? The black stallion blinked and looked at the pair, then at his wife. "Oh no. I think not." But then he added softly, "But how are we going to explain it to the others?" "They're in love," the white Batpony said, and then added with an arch little smile. "And we can also point out that without some outside blood we'll soon be marrying our children to each other, and our oaths to Luna won't matter in the slightest, now will they?" Tenebra blinked and then flew in front of me with a slightly frantic smile. Do you happen to know a stallion or two that you could introduce me to?" "Really? I'm not picky so long as they're somewhat decent and willing to come too." "Tenebra," her mother said firmly. The dusky blue-maned mare slumped and whined, "But Mum, Stygius got 3 days on the surface and got to fool around. Why can't I?" "It's not like surfacers can tell one of us from another." "Because you're more responsible than your brother," her mother said simply. Tenebra crossed her forehooves as she sat with a thump. "Not that much more responsible." Hades rubbed his muzzle. "So, are we done here? All this time on the surface is making my nose itch. I'm sure I'm catching something." The sight of the black stallion wrinkling his nose, a stallion capable of making a radiation engorged alicorn simply disappear, was unnervingly comical. "I think so," Persephone said, and then blinked and smiled at Psyche shy. "I'm sorry, my dear. I don't think I caught your name." "It's Psi," Stygius began when she lifted her wing to his lips. "It's Whisper." "My name is Wind Whisper," she said as she looked back at me. "Hut. Well, if she was going to make a new life, I supposed it was only fair she chose whatever name she wanted." "Very well then," Persephone said as the Batponies gathered together around Hades. The black stallion pointed at me. "Aren't we supposed to kill them too? To preserve the secret and whatnot?" "Don't be ridiculous. Blackjack's the saint of the Wasteland. You can trust her," Stygius said at once as he waved his wing at me. Hades didn't quite look convinced, but his wife shook her head, and that seemed to settle the matter. The yellow Pegasus nuzzled the side of Stygius' neck and Stygius gave his nervous grin. All right, the harried stallion said as he looked around. "Every pony here? Darkling? Tenebra? Stygius? Umber? Beloved? Wind, what's your name?" I guessed Umbra was the unconscious stallion Rampage had knocked out. "Good." "Psic, Wind Whisper smiled to me and called out, "Thanks for giving me a chance, Blackjack." "But wait. What about?" I started to shout. Then the black double formed around the 7 ponies, and they disappeared. I sat down hard, lacunae. Oh crap. A moment later there was a popping noise, and the immense purple alicorn appeared where she'd vanished. Then there were 3 more pops and my magic bullet streaked up towards the dark clouds above. She blinked down at me, looked above her, and then over at where Rampage began to stir. Rampage shoot dirt and debris off her armor, and trotted over as the huge alicorn asked in slow bafflement, "What just happened?" I didn't even know where to start.